Hey guys, Sam Miller from Panhandle Precision. Today we're going to do a product review on the MEC Marksman reloading press. For those of you who don't know what MEC is or who MEC is Mayville Engineering Company out of Mayville, Wisconsin. They've been making shot shell reloaders since like the 50s. And then more recently they've started making target throwers, clay target throwers. In 2016 they decided that they wanted to have a metallic reloading presence in the reloading world. So they came up with the Marksman and a whole bunch of other things that metallic reloaders like rifle and pistol guys can use. Anyway, I wanted to add a press in my shop to give me more capability for actually working out here and in the house, and it was just really good timing. One of the engineers from MEC contacted me and wanted to know if I was interested in looking at the Marksman. So that's where we're at, that's why we're here, and I'll tell you what, I've been using it for about 6 weeks now and I love the press so far. But anyway, let's get started on it. So what I'm going to do with this review, instead of just standing here telling you about the press, I'm actually going to reload some cases on it. I'm going to size cases and deprime cases and point out all the features of the press while I'm doing that. Okay, so what I'm going to be reviewing is the MEC Marksman press, and it's sitting on the press base. So these are two separate pieces. The press base itself is an accessory. Normally you would just bolt this down to your bench so it would be sitting down here, but they sent me this press base to try out, and I'll tell you what, it rocks. Okay, the first thing I do in the reloading process is knock the primers out of my fired brass. And that's where one of the features of the Marksman comes into play that I like the most. Inside the ram there is a hole at the bottom. It's hollow on the inside, so there's a cavity that runs all the way down, and there's a hole towards the bottom of it on the side to the back that when you extend it like this allows the primers to come down the ram, out that hole, and there's a deflector system that makes them drop right into a tray mounted on the back of the press. And then that tray just comes off and you dump it out. Now there's also a little catch tray down here that you can get. It's just a little piece of plastic that goes under this press mount that will catch any little flakes of carbon or whatever that's left over. But it's been my experience that every single one of those primers, when it comes down that hole and hits those deflectors, is going to end up in that little tray. But I'll give you a closer look at that now. Now for the guys who prefer to be sitting right at their press, they also make a press handle that's only 10 inches. This is the standard length one, and I don't have any problem at all with it. I actually prefer standing like this. This is the first time I've been able to do this, other than with my Dillon. But this press mount makes it really handy so that you can stand right in front of it like that on a bench like this and reach for things. You don't have to get up off of a stool. So I am really digging this press mount. And you obviously don't need a whole lot of leverage to pop primers out. But as you'll see when we get a little bit further into this review, this works just fine for sizing brass. So another cool thing about the Marksman is the way it retains the shell holder. So it just has this spring clip attached to the ram that you just push down to slide out that shell holder. So as I move over from doing that 300 Win Mag brass and start doing 260, all I have to do is slide another shell holder in place. And what that allows it to do is float so that you don't, the shell holder can't influence how the case goes up into the die while you're sizing it, which is a good feature. At the same time, that clip holds on to the shell holder, so you don't have to worry about the shell holder popping off when you slide a case out. You know, it's positively retained in there. Alright, so that was 170 primers that I just popped out of these two batches of cases. One's a 300 Win Mag, one's a 260. So let's see how many this caught. And there's quite a mountain going on right at the edge of this. I probably should have not let that happen, but there's all the primers that it caught in the tray. 100%. So I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anvils in this secondary tray that sits right at the bottom of the strong mount or the press base here. But all of the cups landed right inside that tray perfectly. So you can see why that's a good idea, because we don't have a bunch of mess here around the base of our press, getting onto the ram and everything. They're not dropping out at your feet onto the floor, and getting tracked up in your shoes and stuff like that. I really like this system. I think it works well. Alright guys, I'll put the tape measure up here so you can get an idea about some dimensions. This is the press body itself. And then this is from the bench to the top of the press body. Now this thing is tough. I mean, it's built like a tank. This is built exactly like you would think a tool ought to be built that's going to last a lifetime. It's made out of ductile iron. It's completely made in the US, right there in Wisconsin. All these pivot points, this piece of steel here is about 1/4 inch thick. I mean, it's just stout, and everything's smooth on it. All these pivot points are very smooth, and there's absolutely no hanging up or anything. They just glide. Now, this is a 1-inch ram, and it fits exactly like they ought to. Nice and tight, but it doesn't hang up at all. It's very smooth. You know, in my opinion, that's exactly how a reloading press should be. It should be very strong, very stout, very stiff, but the ram should operate very smoothly. And this press definitely does all of that. Another thing I really like about this press is it's all wide open right here. There's nothing in your way. It's just very easy to access. It has a huge opening, so we're looking at about 4 inches there from the top of the shell holder to the top of the press. So it'll handle cases like Remington Ultra Mag cases very easily. Okay, if you look at the press handle and the way the pivot down here on the ram works, this handle is ambidextrous. So when you install the handle, you can actually loosen that nut and spin this around to this side. So if you want to pull with your left hand, you can do that easily with this press. And again, it has a 10-inch version of this handle, so if you wanted just a smaller, shorter throw press, if you don't need the leverage, then you can put that on there as well. Let's go over a couple things before I start sizing brass. So we're looking at the top of the press here, and when you get it, it's ready to go for 7/8 by 14 dies like this Redding sizing die. The only thing I had to do to get it working was put a little bit of oil on my die and run it down with an adjustable wrench with this lock nut. The reason for that is that the threads are coated with some kind of an E-coat, which is an anti-corrosion coating on it that keeps it from rusting or whatever during long-term storage. So even when I ran that down with the oil, it didn't take all of that finish off, which is probably a good thing. Now this bushing is threaded into the press body itself, and you can take that out. It's blue Loctited in as it is, but you can take that out and substitute the Hornady lock and load system in its place. Now up on top here, there's a cavity. I'm told that was just there during the manufacturing process, part of the mold, but they have an accessory tray that snaps onto the outside of this and hangs over the back that holds shell holders. Well, right now I just have my shell holder sitting in that with an extra hex key, but that's probably going to be a pretty good accessory that I'm going to add next. I really think that run-out problems in size brass is mostly caused by the die, or at least a relationship between the die and the shell holder. So your threads can be off a little bit, or your die can be off a little bit, or all kinds of things can happen. I don't really get all wound around the axle about it, but I do like to check it when it comes out of the die. So what we'll do now is we'll see how straight the Marksman kept my brass up inside that die as I was sizing it. Alright, to check size case run out, I use this Sinclair concentricity gauge, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to check the run out of the neck as compared to the body of the case. It's a lot easier to do when I'm standing right in front of it, but then there's no room for the camera. So let's run a couple on here. Now, the time you want to do this obviously is right after you start sizing cases, but I sized a few and checked them coming out and they were fine. So what I did was I just went ahead and ran the whole batch, and then I ran them through the tumbler. And again, I think that if you have a problem here, it's mostly in the die. But I suppose a press can mess it up too. But this press obviously doesn't bend the case as it comes up on the ram into the die. Alright guys, well I think it's fairly obvious that I really like this press. I'm really glad it's sitting on my bench. It was really good timing. It's a great press. It doesn't bend cases. It's smooth. It's easy to operate. Has a ton of working room right in here. It has a lot of good useful features to it that tell me that this thing's going to last for a long time. If you buy this press or you're thinking about buying this press, just keep in mind that there is no priming capability built into it. There's no swing arm, there's no lever right here to let you run a primer into a size case. Apparently they took a poll among shooters and asked them, how important is that feature to you? And the poll must have told them that it's not important. And I tend to agree. I haven't used a press to seat a primer since like '93 or something. I use a bench mounted deal separate from the press. But if you absolutely have to have a press with a priming function to it, this isn't the one for you. The other thing I would caution you against is if you want to mount this directly to a bench, you have to keep in mind that the primer collection system sits behind the ram. So as you come up, behind this is where this tray is. So it's about right there underneath the machine. So if you're going to mount this to a bench, you have to keep in mind you're going to need clearance there. So if you wanted to mount it on a, say, a solid 2x4 bench, like I see a lot of guys do where they laminate it together, that won't work without modifications. You're going to have to at least notch it out to give yourself clearance for this tray. If you just mount it to a thick bench, say 2.5 inches or 3 inches even, you probably wouldn't have a problem. But those are the only two big things that I would notice about this. Now, if you get the press kit or the press base, this mounting kit here, then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's just ready to rock and roll, exactly how you see me using it. And I'll tell you, the only time I've ever used an elevated base like this was on my Dillon, and I really like that one, but I've never used a single stage press like that, and now that I have, I love it. It's awesome. So I'd highly recommend just getting this press base. If you're interested in getting one, you can order them right from MEC, right there on their website. The press is $235. The press mount is $48. I just looked it up online, and Midway USA and Brownells both have this press for $189. They also both sell the mounting kit or the press base for $41. I think it's well worth the investment. But anyway, this is the MEC Marksman. I really like it. I think if you're looking for a single stage press, you should definitely take a peek at one of these. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.